Episode 9 is about to start. I'm Jamie, your host of VXI Conversations Season 2. So let's get right down to it. For Episode 8, Manager for Leadership and Organizational Effectiveness, Miss Jessa, guided us through the process of transitioning into a new career. And during this process, one would probably wonder if the industry he or she is about to transition into is pandemic proof. As we all know, we are still very much in the middle of a pandemic, and during its onslaught, it temporarily halted operations of various industries. But how exactly do we determine this? Here to help us do just that is the first ever VXI site director to grace our podcast. So please help me give him a very warm welcome. We have SDJ Tonka of VXI Davao Felcris Centrale. Hi, SDJ. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning, Jamie. Good morning to our listeners and viewers.
I love the smile, SDJ. Thank you so much for finding the time to be with us today. I know you're very busy. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. We've had a quick and I should say very successful rebound from everything that's happened. So, after that, as we move on to hopefully an endemic versus a pandemic,
Mm-hmm.
that the growth continues. It's been a wild ride from 2 years back. So, I'm hoping the next years to come are more forgiving.
I'm hoping for that as well, SDJ. And that's precisely why we asked you to be here. We want to pick your brain and understand how it was for leaders like you during the pandemic and how leaders can also learn from you in tough situations like that, how they can survive it and surpass it. But before we jump into this topic of ours today, SDJ, we'd love to know you more. I know that most of the VXI employees probably know your background. But to those who aren't in the BPO industry watching us right now, why don't you introduce yourself and talk about your experience in the BPO industry, especially in VXI?
Thank you. So it's about half of my adult life that I've spent in this industry, and if there's anything I really appreciate out of all of the industries, I think there's more opportunity that you can find with the call center BPO space than any other industry there is. I've had the chance to visit multiple countries. I've traveled most of the Philippines. 5 years of that meant moving to Davao. I started
Mm-hmm.
in Davao in 2016 to launch the site, and I've been here
Mm,
ever since. But prior to that, in my existing role, I've been a site director for about 8 years now.
that's amazing, SDJ. Very inspiring. And I echo what you said. I really believe in this industry and the many opportunities it offers individuals out there, especially in the Philippines. You've been a site director for 8 years, as you mentioned, and you've been a leader for far more than that. So let's talk about your experience as a leader. Let's dive into our topic now. Can you recall a time when you felt inspired to emulate a former boss of yours who was able to lead despite going through difficulties at work? Because you mentioned it yourself. We and I mentioned it when we began this podcast. The last 2 years has been difficult. It's been a wild ride. And somehow VXI is coming out of it on top. You still are thriving and succeeding in this industry. So was there ever a time that a leader inspired you in tough situations like what we went through in the last 2 years?
Yeah, I'll focus more on say on the pandemic. During the pandemic, in 2020, on one of the first virtual GAs that we actually had. This was during time of the lockdowns. One of the things I actually reference is a movie. It's the same time that Greyhound launched. I'm not sure
Mm,
if you remember. It's a Tom Hanks movie. I'm a big fan. But in those movies, it's really how you emulate the characters, the heroes. And if I was to choose just one person, I think it's unfair because really that's where you saw everyday heroes. I think you've mentioned that
mm,
in the past podcasts that you have. Starting from the owners to our country head to our fearless leader, Sir Jared.
Mm.
Back then, I also transitioned to a new leader, which was Ryan, our vice president for operations. And I think really there's anything to highlight is the fact that even in the hard times, people have a tendency to forget, you know, how to celebrate. If there's anything that we
Yeah.
didn't take away was a site engagement. It was having fun despite the pandemic, and not to mention, and I think this has been said many times, is the amount of investment that VXI
Mm.
actually made. Because if you think about it, at the height of the pandemic, we had about 441 hotel rooms.
Wow.
Everyone shuttled, food, and
Wow.
everything was cared for. I mean, that's the extent of what of how we tried to manage and navigate through a new normal during that period, and the amount of investment and the belief in the local talent. So
Mm.
it's really kudos to our everyday heroes, to the owners, our our fearless leaders, everyone that had a hand in really getting us through the pandemic.
I love your answer because I really wasn't expecting that SDJ. And instead of giving me an answer of one leader that you look up to and inspired you, you talked about the everyday VXI heroes that we've had on this podcast several times. And again, that truly shows the kind of environment VXI offers. I've witnessed it time and time again as your host for events. You're right, investment is there. And VXI continuously ensures that you continue to celebrate the everyday things despite the pandemic. So thank you for that. You're an inspiring leader, SDJ. And speaking of that, you have been in this position for 8 years, 5 years of which in Davao. So you were in Davao when this pandemic, this global pandemic, shook our worlds. As a part of the VXI leadership team, SDJ, were you able to lead? How were you able to lead amid the ongoing pandemic?
I always try to summarize things in three major points. I think the very first one is safety was the top priority. I mean, when you
Mm-hmm.
talk about the sanitation, the health protocols, just the amount of um, just the focus we had on keeping the workplace clean and keeping everyone safe. I think that was
Mm-hmm.
really the top priority during the pandemic, especially in this type where it's a virus
Yeah.
that that plagued the entire world. It wasn't a joke. So we took that as a top priority. That's the health and safety of each individual primarily.
Mm-hmm.
Second one is information, because keeping everyone informed, making sure from internal communications to how we address the staff to even coming up with a general assembly that's purely virtual during that first year of the lockdown,
Mm-hmm.
and making sure that we have multiple avenues to disseminate information, not just one. That's why we've slowly evolved, and this is one of those metamorphoses of how we disseminate information now.
Mm-hmm.
And I think
Amazing.
lastly,
Mm-hmm.
it's about being the dependability that we had as an
Yeah.
organization, being an anchor for the team. For my part, not just through the pandemic, but even on earthquakes, I'm the very first one to the door to help if we needed to evacuate, but also that they see someone there so that
Mm-hmm.
they can be guided and everyone keeps calm and orderly. So it's that dependability. It's making sure that also everyone is engaged,
Yeah.
especially during those difficult times where people have a tendency to regress or feel helpless, or where we wanted everyone to make sure that everyone was engaged.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's anything that VXI does very well too is keeping us empowered,
Yeah.
especially for the site leaders, where we're given a big responsibility, but also given great empowerment when it comes to decision making, to how we manage, handle, and react to these crises or the everyday, just the day-to-day operations.
Mm-hmm. SDJ, I really also want to understand the internal process you went through as a leader. You talked about how you were able to help the site during the last 2 years and how you were able to still sustain dependability throughout that very difficult time. But as a leader, what did it do to you, and how did you ensure that you could adapt to that situation? I think it was 2019 December going into 2020 when we finally understood that no, it wasn't just one case. This is something that's going to plague our country and we're going to have to adjust. Come March, I think, is when we started stopping some operations, not for VXI alone, but industries in general. So, as a leader, what did that situation do to you? How did you feel at that time? And what process of transitioning did you go through during the start of the pandemic?
For me, it was really a test of character because it measured how you reacted to such a life changing moment, for lack of a
Yeah.
better term, because
True.
it did change the lives of many, not just for
Mhm.
me personally, but also for my family and how how everyone engaged, how communication was so different, and how easy it was prior to the pandemic. So it's really it's a test of character, and then I'm very proud that despite all, it's not just me, but it's also the leaders around me because
Mhm.
I think our measure as leaders is always about influence, and if we positively influence the people around us, then that's a great measure of success for just how everyone strived and coped, and now we're exceeding. That's why our slogan actually before this endemic was we survived, we thrived, and now we exceed.
I love that. We survive, we thrive, and now we exceed. I'm going to remember that and borrow that as DJ.
We have a
And
video
there
for
you
it.
go again. I'll quote you, don't worry. I'll say it's SDJ's line. But anyway, SDJ, there you go again. When I asked you this question, you then discussed the many leaders out there, the VXI heroes, not just you, but the many leaders out there. So let's zoom in on that. How do you think should team leaders guide their people or their teammates during challenging times?
Yeah, my advice to future leaders is always going to be one is keeping a positive mindset. That's why it's foundational when we talk for new leaders in VXI that they go through 7 habits,
Mm,
because the 7 habits of highly effective people is it's the same mindset of having a positive attitude where you're being proactive, beginning with the end in mind. All of the 7 actual habits that you learn from Dr. Covey, and how it's foundational for new leaders to undergo through that training.
mm-hmm,
Over the years, we've also talked about something that's very essential is how to build trust, which is even
mm-hmm,
more important now, especially in a virtual environment. How do you actually do that? Because building trust is so essential in managing and also having your leaders, you know, or how you gain the trust from your own leaders.
mm-hmm.
And I think ultimately it's how never to stop learning, because
I love
if
that.
there's anything I've been also graced with having this job in this position over the years is I've learned a lot. I mean, I thought I stopped learning when I finished college, but it's it's been an onslaught of of learning new things. Some you learn experiential, but there has been so many opportunities where I've also learned through classroom and through seminars.
Yeah, I love that. And what's the one lesson, SDJ, that you learned from having to lead your team during the last 2 years or during hard times in general?
You told me I kept on referencing to the people around me because I think that's really the lesson in any situation or crisis is how you can rely on others. I think
Hmm.
um, you get to see the best in individuals in the hardest situations. And that's what I've seen with the team that's been around me, to the team that supported me. It takes a village to run a site. It's not just one person. I could have the title, but it's really irrelevant to what we do daily, because it takes an entire team to run the site. It's about
Mm-hmm.
seeking help and also helping those who depend on you. And that's why I said that, it's probably in the worst of times that you see the best in people. And I've seen that not just in this pandemic, but actually a Yolanda survivor. Uh,
Yeah.
that's I'm one of those probably luckiest guys, because I went through Yolanda in this pandemic, so that makes me
Okay.
a lucky survivor. But I saw the good in people in those situations where the best of them really come out.
You're indeed a survivor, SDJ, and your team has been survivors. And again, I'm going to go back to what you said. It really takes a village to lead, to thrive, to succeed, to exceed. So thank you for sharing that. You're very inspiring. So many times during this interview, I've had goosebumps because for me, the mark of a good leader is when that leader doesn't really focus on himself, but focus on the people who also stand as legs of the team and continuously uh, just give their best to the team. And time again throughout this interview, you've said that it's the team, it's the people around me, it's the everyday people who do their roles, who fulfill their roles. They make this work. Now, out there, the world is still going through this global pandemic. In fact, left and right, we're hearing about a surge here and there, especially in the metro. So there's a new leader probably out there, SDJ, who's about to lead his or her own team as we continue to live and thrive with this virus. Do you have any inspiring words or tips for all of them?
I- I'm not sure if it's inspiring, but if there's anything I've always, I think you should start yourself with three questions. Same thing that we had when we launched this site. Is the first one is what? What's really your goal? What do you want to
Mm-hmm.
accomplish? Because I think in any situation, whether it's the crisis or a pursuit of excellence, the pursuit of happiness, your pursuit in life, I mean, really, what's your goal? I think once you've established that, you've established the very first important question on how to become successful in life, not just in a position.
Mm-hmm.
Second is the hows. It's really the understanding. That's why I've always said it's continuous learning. It's the moment you stop learning is probably the time that you can say that you can retire and call it quits and
Mm-hmm.
say you're done. You've made your mark and that you've really accomplished something in life. And then I think the most important question is why. I mean, why even do
Mm-hmm.
it, right? People say why is because, why get up in the morning, come to work, try to do what you do, but if you haven't really established why you're doing it, just like for me, I mean, something I've normally mentioned in most of the assembly or in the opportunities I've had to talk to a lot of people, I've had a very firm foundation. My foundation has always been my family. I've
Mm.
I have 5 kids. One passed away actually when he was just about 6 months old. I should have
I'm
had six,
sorry, SDJ.
but
I'm sorry to hear about that. Yeah.
they've been with me throughout this entire 20-year call center journey, moving from Manila to Cebu, Cebu to Leyte, Leyte back to Manila, and now here in Davao. They've been my anchor. They've been really the inspiration for the things that I do, and probably that's
Mm-hmm.
why when I relate to individuals, I have a tendency to go back to that because that's really been my inspiration.
Mm-hmm. What, how, and why? You continue to inspire so many out there, SDJ. Thank you for sharing your thoughts and wisdom around this. being a leader is truly a great responsibility as shared by SDJ. You don't only have to think of yourself but your team as well. And it really requires a certain level of maturity and selflessness to be able to put others' needs above your own. SDJ mentioned it earlier, dependability. Someone has to be there. When tough things happen, especially, you need to be able to provide that dependability to your team. Now, this is especially the case when you're faced with challenges and other external factors beyond your control, like what we've collectively gone through in the last 2 years. Once again, thank you so much to SDJ for imparting his knowledge and wisdom with us today. I'm very sure there's a budding leader out there listening to us right now who has been inspired, like I have been, to do and be better for his own team and to ask these questions: how, what, why? Before we go, SDJ, do you have a message for our listeners and viewers out there?
No, I think I've said a lot. Keep it short. Just keep safe. Again, go back to those three questions. Ask yourself really, what's my goal? How am I going to do it? And why do it in the first place?
Thank you so much for that reminder, SDJ. And again, thank you for finding the time to be with us on the podcast. We appreciate you. Now,
Thank
if
you.
you're curious to secure a brand new job at VXI PH, SDJ and I discussed it earlier, this industry offers so many opportunities, and VXI is such a great environment to work in. It's such a great company. And if you are curious about the job opportunities within this company, all you have to do is browse through our career opportunities on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, and TikTok. The handle is right there, VXIPH. You can also send your resumes at careersph@vxi.com. Candidates with or without BPO experience are very much welcome to apply, provided they are a graduate of at least high school old curriculum or senior high school with good English communication skills. Episode 9 has officially ended, but we got a few tricks up our sleeves for the remainder of season 2. So that's something you can look forward to. Join us again next week for another eye opening episode of VXI Conversations. This is Jamie saying goodbye. Thank you, SDJ. And
Thank
thank
you.
you, everybody. Take care and stay safe till next week. Bye.
Bye.